Have you ever witnessed someone being publicly humiliated by someone powerful and felt deep down that it wasn't going to end well? Imagine a courtroom in complete silence, the air heavy, every gaze attentive to every word echoing in that solemn space. It is in this setting that this story begins, an environment where justice should prevail, but where, for a few minutes, arrogance tries to occupy the center of the room. The billionaire enters with firm steps, impeccably dressed, with the posture of someone accustomed to being in charge. His name carries weight, his fortune precedes him, and he acts as if that court were just another place where his money solves everything. His gaze sweeps the room with disdain, as if he has already decided the outcome before even hearing any argument. For him, it's nothing more than an uncomfortable formality, a waste of time. On the other side, seated discreetly, is a black woman. She doesn't draw attention at first glance. She doesn't raise. Her voice doesn't react to provocations, doesn't try to assert herself. And perhaps that's exactly what awakens the immediate contempt of that powerful man. The billionaire observes her quickly and, without any care, categorizes her into the stereotype that his prejudiced mind has constructed. In his view, she is just another unimportant person in that process. Then the humiliation begins. Sarcastic comments, irony disguised as arguments, phrases laden with superiority. He speaks loudly, interrupts, laughs sarcastically. At one point he addresses her as if he were speaking to someone inferior, someone who should know their place. The audience in the courtroom reacts in silence. Some look away, others watch awkwardly. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever seen someone treated with contempt simply for not fitting into a power dynamic? The black woman remains silent. Her face betrays neither anger nor fear, only attentiveness. Every word spoken against her seems to be carefully registered. The billionaire, feeling increasingly comfortable, goes too far. He believes he is in complete control of the situation. After all, how many times has wealth saved him before? How many doors have opened because of his name? The atmosphere on the court grows even more tense. The silence weighs more than any shout. There's something strange about the calmness of the woman being humiliated, something that doesn't fit the role the billionaire is trying to impose on her. And that's exactly where the curiosity begins to grow. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because the one who speaks loudest isn't always the one who truly holds the power. As he continues his display of arrogance, some people begin to realize that this woman is not who he imagines her to be. There is a firm posture behind the discretion, a control that does not stem from submission, but from silent authority. Stay with me until the end of this story, because every detail matters, and every second is leading this powerful man to a mistake he will never forget. The courtroom remains silent, but now it's no longer a silence of embarrassment. It's a silence of expectation. Something is about to change, something that will turn this situation upside down. And when the truth begins to emerge, no amount of money, influence, or arrogance will be able to stop the weight of justice that slowly approaches, leaving in the air the feeling that this man is about to learn a lesson in the hardest way possible. And while all this unfolds before the eyes of the viewer, it's impossible not to recognize oneself, even if only a little, in this scene. Because stories like this don't only live in courtrooms or on the news. They repeat themselves in offices, government departments, bank queues, waiting rooms, whenever someone believes they can diminish another person because of their appearance, skin color, or the position they imagine that person holds. If this topic resonates with you, if something here has touched you in some way, leave a comment about what has most caught your attention so far. Your experience, your opinion, what you felt when you heard this story. All of that matters more than you imagine. When you comment, you're not just writing a message. You're telling other people that they're not alone, that situations like this need to be discussed, remembered, and questioned. And if at any point you've been underestimated, ignored, or humiliated, this space is also yours. Here, each account strengthens this conversation and gives even more meaning to everything we're building together. If you feel that stories of poetic justice, social upheavals, and reverse humiliation need to reach more people, liking this video is a simple yet powerful way to help this message go further. That's how the content reaches those who need to hear it, those who may be going through something similar right now. And if you want to continue following stories like this, which stir emotions, reflection, and show that the truth always finds a way to emerge, subscribing to the channel is almost like saying, "I want to be a part of this." Your participation here is what makes this channel grow, gain strength, and continue bringing narratives that provoke, disturb, and transform, because this story is far from over, and what is about to be revealed inside that courtroom will completely change the course of everything you've heard so far. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what truly underpins this entire situation is not just the man's blatant arrogance, but the silent narrative he creates within his own mind. While the court remains vigilant, the billionaire no longer sees the people around him. He sees labels. For him, everything is appearance, everything is superficial reading. The well-tailored suit he wears becomes, in his mind, a kind of authorization to judge who deserves respect and who doesn't even deserve to be heard. When his eyes fall upon that black woman again, the judgment is swift, automatic, almost unconscious. He observes her discreet clothing, her restrained posture, the silence she maintains, and decides, without any doubt, who she is, or rather, who he believes her to be. In the narrative he constructs, she is nothing more than an ordinary employee, perhaps someone who is there only to follow orders, or at most, a beginning lawyer trying to establish herself in an environment too large for her. In his mind, power announces itself, power makes noise, power occupies space, and that woman does none of that. This is the classic mistake that is repeated every day in so many different places, confusing silence with weakness, confusing simplicity with lack of preparation, confusing discretion with submission. The billionaire doesn't realize that while he shows off, she observes. While he talks too much, she chooses each second of silence as part of a much larger decision. And this says a lot about mindset, about how some people need to diminish others to feel great. He feels comfortable because he believes he knows the game. He's been in more intimidating meeting rooms, faced tougher negotiations, and emerged victorious from situations where everyone bet against him. This history creates a false sense of invincibility, a dangerous certainty that the world always works the same way. Those with money rule, those without obey. And it's with this distorted logic that he continues to advance. Without realizing he's walking straight towards his own downfall. There's something almost invisible happening behind the scenes of this scene. While he reinforces the narrative of superiority, he also reveals a lot about himself. Every snide comment, every disdainful glance, every interruption carries a hidden truth, the fear of losing control. Because those who truly have authority don't need to prove it all the time. And those who need to prove it are usually the ones who know they're treading on shaky ground. The black woman, on the other hand, remains steadfast, not because she doesn't feel the weight of the situation, but because she understands exactly where she is. There is a journey behind that silence, a history of difficult decisions, of choices that demanded preparation, study, and resilience. Nothing there is accidental. Nothing there is improvised. She knows that that environment demands posture, not reaction, and this creates an almost disconcerting contrast. Between the two, on one side the haste to dominate, on the other the calm of someone who knows the impact she carries. The billionaire doesn't see this because he's not used to looking beyond the surface. He doesn't see the transformation that woman represents in that space. He doesn't realize that, while he clings to the past and status, she walks based on merit, responsibility, and awareness of her own role. And the more he insists on diminishing her, the more he exposes the magnitude of the mistake he's making. This type of judgment based on appearance doesn't come from nowhere. It's fueled by a culture that associates authority with certain faces, certain clothes, certain behaviors. When something deviates from this pattern, the reaction is distrust, contempt, or an attempt to invalidate it. And that's precisely where the downfall lies, because the real world doesn't respect these invisible rules that some insist on following. There's a silent impact in that moment, on the audience watching, in the glances that begin to meet, in small expressions that reveal that not everyone there shares the billionaire's misguided interpretation. Something begins to move, albeit subtly, as if the room itself senses that this story is about to slip out of the control of those who believe they are in charge. And while he continues to believe he knows exactly who he's dealing with, the distance between his perception and reality only widens. Every word he utters becomes evidence against himself. Every gesture of contempt builds, without him realizing it, the perfect scenario for an inevitable clash with the truth, because there comes a point when appearances no longer sustain the lie. A moment when the masks fall and everything that was hidden begins to take shape, and it is at that exact point that the story begins to turn, even if he has no idea about it. If everything said so far resonates with you, leave a comment below. That makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it is precisely in her silence that the most powerful part of this story resides. While the billionaire remains trapped in his own superficial reading of the situation, that black woman carries something that is not announced, not displayed, and does not seek validation. There is an authority there that doesn't need a stage, and this wasn't born that day in that courtroom. It is the fruit of a long journey, made of difficult choices, constant study, and decisions that demanded courage when no one was watching. Her silence is not a lack of response, it's strategy, it's awareness of the right time. She understands the environment, understands the institutional weight of that place, and above all, understands who she is. There's no rush to defend herself because there's no internal doubt to be fought. While the billionaire is driven by the need to dominate the narrative, she remains firm because she knows that the truth doesn't need to be rushed. It arrives when it finds the exact space to make an impact. Behind that reserved demeanor lies a journey marked by preparation. Each step taken up to that point demanded more than talent. It required emotional resilience, strategic intelligence, and a mindset trained to withstand sideways glances, closed doors, and silent judgments. None of this appears on the surface. And perhaps that's precisely why the billionaire doesn't see it. He never needed to look so deep to recognize value. The name, the money, the status were always enough. While he speaks, she observes. She observes the excesses, the interruptions, the tone of disdain. She observes how comfortable he feels in a role he believes he masters, and each observation transforms into information. Each word he speaks constructs, without him realizing it, a true portrait of his own mentality. She doesn't react because she knows that reacting at that moment would be a waste. Silence there is an active choice, a clear stance, from someone who knows exactly where she stands. There's something almost invisible happening behind the scenes of this emotional scene. The billionaire believes he's in control, but in practice, he's revealing himself completely. She, on the other hand, the more silent she is, the more she preserves her strength. It's a contrast that only becomes evident to those who understand that true authority isn't imposed by voice, but by posture. And this begins to create a subtle discomfort in the atmosphere. Some people in the courtroom start to realize that this woman isn't intimidated. She's centered. This kind of silence requires maturity. It requires inner transformation. It requires having gone through situations where speaking was pointless, where proving something to someone wouldn't change the outcome. She learned throughout her own journey that there are times when the best decision is to let the other person move forward on their own until they can no longer retreat. And the billionaire is walking exactly in that direction, driven by his own arrogance. Every second that passes without reaction increases the impact of what has not yet been said. The viewer feels it. There's a different kind of tension in the air. It's no longer just indignation, it's expectation. Something is being built slowly, as if the scales are shifting millimeter by millimeter. And the more the billionaire exposes himself, the clearer it becomes that he's fighting against something he doesn't understand. She knows the weight of the decisions she made to get there. She knows the personal cost, the invisible sacrifices, the renunciations that no one applauded. And perhaps that's why there's no need to prove anything at that moment. She's not there to defeat a man. She's there to fulfill a role. And that difference changes everything. While he seeks affirmation, she operates from a position of responsibility. The hidden truth begins to approach the center of the scene, not abruptly, but inevitably. It's as if the environment itself is waiting for the right moment to reveal what is still beyond the billionaire's reach. And this waiting is not passive. It carries intention, awareness, and an absolute mastery of the rhythm of the situation. Her silence begins to speak louder than any speech, a silence that disturbs, that provokes, that destabilizes those accustomed to being obeyed immediately. And this unease is the first sign that something is about to change, because when real authority enters the scene, it doesn't ask permission. It simply presents itself. There comes a point where the narrative created by the billionaire no longer holds up. The pieces begin to fall apart. His overconfidence contrasts sharply with her calmness. And it is in this space between arrogance and serenity that the revelation begins to take shape. Still invisible, but increasingly close to breaking through the surface. If you feel that this silence speaks louder than 1,000 words, write it in the comments. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there is a specific moment when the entire previous structure collapses all at once. It's not gradual, it's not smooth, it's dry, direct, and impossible to ignore. The court, which until then had been watching the scene with restrained tension, falls into a different kind of silence, no longer one of expectation, but of recognition. Something changes in the air, something that can no longer be controlled by money, loud voices, or intimidating presence. The moment of revelation is not accompanied by exaggerated dramatization. It happens in an almost simple, institutional way, like everything that carries real authority. A name is pronounced, a position is mentioned, a protocol is followed, and suddenly the entire narrative that the billionaire had constructed in his own mind shatters. The woman he tried to diminish, interrupt, and silence was not an employee, not a novice lawyer, not a mere extra in that space. She was the federal judge responsible for the case. The impact is immediate. The billionaire freezes. His body, previously relaxed and confident, loses its balance. His face changes. The expression of superiority gives way to a mixture of disbelief, embarrassment, and suppressed fear. In seconds, it's possible to see his mind trying to reorganize a reality that no longer obeys the rules he knows. No words come out. No argument makes sense now. The silence that settles in the courtroom is absolute. It's not collective embarrassment. It's reverence. It's the recognition of the institutional weight that has just been revealed. Each person there understands at that exact moment that they are witnessing a complete shift in power. Everything the billionaire believed he controlled is slipping through his fingers. The truth, when it appears, doesn't argue. It imposes itself. The judge maintains the same posture. There is no smile, no provocation, no need to humiliate in return. Her authority does not stem from revenge, but from a full awareness of her own role. It is a firm, almost imperturbable presence. She doesn't need to remind anyone who she is. The environment does that for her. And this contrast is devastating for someone who has staked everything on arrogance. The billionaire feels the weight of his own decisions. Every previous comment echoes back like a deafening sound. Every interruption, every disdainful glance, every attempt to diminish him now becomes public proof of who he truly is. The transformation happens right there, in front of everyone, with no chance of editing, no backstage area to hide the mistake. It's raw, it's real, it's definitive. This is the kind of revelation that doesn't need shouting to make an impact. It manifests itself in the change of energy in the room, in the way people straighten up in their seats, in the way time seems to slow down for a few seconds. The billionaire who previously occupied too much space now seems small, not out of revenge, but because the truth has this inevitable effect on those who have built power on illusions. That woman's journey finds a point of convergence at that moment. Everything that had remained hidden until then emerges with full force. The preparation, the strategic silence, the conscious choices. Nothing was in vain, nothing was by chance. And the most impactful thing is realizing that she didn't need to raise her voice at any point for the world around her to reorganize itself around reality. The audience feels the shift in their bodies. There's an emotional impact that's hard to describe because it mixes relief, justice, and a kind of symbolic correction. It's as if something has been put back in its rightful place. Arrogance meets truth, and truth doesn't need to fight for space. It simply occupies it. The billionaire now understands, too late, that he underestimated not just one person, but an entire system, a history of resistance, a trajectory built far from the spotlight. He realizes that he confused silence with fragility, and that this misinterpretation has cost him dearly, not financially, but morally, publicly, irreversibly. The judge, in turn, proceeds with the process as procedure dictates. No apparent emotion, no pleasure in the downfall of others, because true power is not fueled by the humiliation of others, but by the responsibility of making decisions that generate real impact. And it is precisely this difference that makes the scene so striking. What happens from this point on no longer depends on the billionaire. The dynamics have changed. The hierarchy has been revealed, and everything that was hidden is now moving towards inevitable consequences, still unfolding in the heavy silence of that courtroom. If this moment made you feel the weight of the truth arriving without warning, comment below. That makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it is in the silent consequences that poetic justice reveals its full impact. After the revelation, nothing is ever the same again in that courtroom. The billionaire, who minutes ago occupied the space with a loud voice and confident gestures, now seems out of place in his own presence. He loses his rhythm, loses control, loses mastery of the narrative he believed he commanded. Each attempt to recover sounds artificial, belated, almost desperate. The respect he assumed was automatic, simply no longer responds to his commands. What we see is a visible transformation, not in a theatrical sense, but a human one. The body reveals what the mind tries to hide. Shoulders slump, gazes wander, words are measured with excessive care. He understands, even if he doesn't verbalize it, that he has crossed a line. And this understanding doesn't come as explicit punishment, but as an uncomfortable mirror. Everything that was said before returns with weight. Everything that was done becomes a record. The advantage he believed he had dissolves before the structure that now imposes itself with clarity. The judge maintains a firm stance. There is no need to raise her voice or emphasize the other party's mistake. The professional that she is takes center stage in the process with the serenity of someone who knows her own limits and responsibilities. Justice, when exercised with balance, does not need spectacle. It manifests itself in coherence, technical rigor, and attention to detail. Each decision made there carries the weight of collective learning, not just an individual outcome. The courtroom atmosphere absorbs this change. People feel it. There's an almost physical impact in the air, as if everyone there understands they've witnessed something that goes beyond that specific case. It's not just about a billionaire and a judge. It's about mindset, about how decisions made based on appearances and ego build invisible traps. It's about the hidden truth that insists on surfacing even when someone tries to stifle it with power and influence. The billionaire learns, in the most direct way possible, that money doesn't replace character and that authority can't be bought. He loses not only the procedural advantage, but the image he tried to maintain. And this loss is profound because it's public. There are no backstage areas to hide in. No editing can erase the moment. Poetic justice acts precisely there, when the mistake becomes a lesson, when arrogance becomes a warning. The judge, in turn, does not become a symbol of revenge but of balance. Her presence reaffirms that respect does not depend on wealth, does not depend on appearance, does not depend on who speaks loudest. It depends on posture, preparation, and commitment to what is right. This is the lesson that no one in that court forgets, because it was not taught with harsh words, but with example. What's most interesting is realizing how this type of situation reverberates beyond that space. Stories like this touch on something universal. They speak of invisible journeys, of choices made away from the spotlight, of internal transformations that don't ask permission to exist. They remind us that the real impact of our decisions often only appears when it's too late to go back. The billionaire emerges changed, not necessarily better, but aware that the world doesn't always bend to money. The judge continues on her path with the same discretion that brought her there, knowing she fulfilled her role without needing to deviate from who she is. And the courtroom, as a setting, transforms into a stage for a simple yet profound truth. Justice finds a way to balance things when least expected. This story doesn't end there, because what was experienced in that space continues to echo in every glance, in every silent thought, in every reflection that arises afterward. Something is still organizing itself behind the scenes of this experience, something that transcends the event itself and directly touches on how we perceive the other even before we hear them. If this reflection resonates with you, leave a comment below. That makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this story has truly resonated with you. So here's what you should do. If this content has made you reflect, if at any point you recognized yourself in this journey or felt that this message spoke to you, it's worth subscribing to the channel. That's how we continue building a space where stories like this have a voice, depth, and purpose. If you want, you can also leave a comment saying, "This message was for me." It's simple, but it helps show that this conversation didn't just stay on the screen, that it touched on something on the other side. And if it makes sense to you, leave a like on the video, not as an obligation, but as a sign of the connection we've created throughout this story. Oh, and before you go, there's a video over here that perfectly complements everything we've just discussed. Click on it and continue with me there. The journey continues.